The current yanked at my legs, cold and relentless, pulling me under like it had a personal grudge. I was 28, drowning in more than just the Bitterroot River, drowning in a life I didn't recognize anymore. Then, out of nowhere, a hand gripped my arm, strong and unyielding, hauling me back to the world I'd almost left behind. My name is Elias Carter, and I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in Montana, not in this river, not gasping for air while a stranger's hazel eyes locked onto mine like they saw every secret I'd buried. I'd come to this nowhere town of Darby to disappear, to outrun the weight of a failed art career and a family that stopped calling after I came out. The river was supposed to be my escape, a place to feel something other than the ache in my chest. But the current had other plans, and so did the cowboy who saved me. His name was Jesse Navarro, 30, with a face carved from hard work and a voice that carried the low drawl of someone who'd spent his life under wide skies. "You tryin' to drown or just bad at swimmin'?" he asked, his tone half teasing, half concerned, as he steadied me on the rocky bank. I wanted to snap back, but my lungs were too busy burning, and his hand was still on my arm, warm against my shivering skin. Jesse wasn't what I expected from a place like Darby. He wasn't all boots and bravado. There was a quiet to him, a kind of gentleness that didn't match the calluses on his palms or the way his flannel shirt strained against his shoulders. He'd been riding along the river trail, he told me, checking fences for the ranch he worked at. I didn't know why he stopped for me, but I was glad he did. We sat there on the bank, me dripping and embarrassed, him offering me a dry jacket that smelled faintly of leather and pine. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of amber and violet, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. "You don't look like you belong here," Jesse said, not unkindly, his eyes scanning my city-soft hands and the paint stains still lingering under my nails. I laughed, bitter. "I don't belong anywhere." He didn't push, didn't pry, just nodded like he understood more than I'd said. We talked as the stars came out, about nothing and everything. How he'd grown up on the ranch, how he loved the way the river sounded at night, how he'd never left Montana but sometimes wondered what was out there. I told him about New York, about galleries that rejected my paintings, about the boyfriend who'd walked out when I needed him most. I don't know why I told him all that, but his silence felt like permission to unravel. By the time we parted ways, my clothes were dry, and something in me felt lighter, like I'd left a piece of my grief in the river. Jesse gave me his number, scrawled on a scrap of paper, and said, "Call if you're ever dumb enough to swim alone again." I smiled, tucking it into my pocket, not sure if I'd ever see him again, but hoping I would. The next morning, I woke up in the tiny cabin I'd rented, the memory of his hand on my arm still vivid. Darby was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone, and I'd planned to keep to myself. But Jesse had other ideas. He showed up at the general store where I was buying coffee, leaning against the counter like he'd been waiting for me. "Thought you might need a guide," he said, tipping his hat with a grin that made my stomach flip. He took me to the ranch that day, a sprawling place called Willow Creek, where the air smelled of hay and freedom. I met his sister, Rosa, 25, a sharp-tongued woman with a laugh that could fill a room. She ran the ranch's books and didn't miss a chance to tease Jesse about his city boy rescue. There was something easy about them, the way they bickered and cared for each other, and it stirred a longing in me I hadn't felt in years. Jesse showed me how to saddle a horse, his hand steady as he guided mine, and for a moment, I forgot I was a stranger here. The ranch was alive with movement, cattle lowing, wind rustling through the cottonwoods, and I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. But there was a shadow too, a tension I couldn't place. Rosa mentioned a developer, some big shot from Seattle named Victor Klein, who'd been sniffing around trying to buy up land. Jesse's jaw tightened at the name, and I saw a flicker of something fierce in his eyes. That night, we sat by a fire outside the ranch house, the flames casting shadows on Jesse's face. He told me about the ranch's history, how his family had worked it for generations, how it was all he had left of his parents. "Klein wants to turn this place into condos," he said, his voice low with anger. "He doesn't care about the land or the people who've lived on it." I didn't know what to say, but I reached out, my hand brushing his, and he didn't pull away. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a promise. I didn't know then how much trouble was coming, or how much Jesse and I would have to fight for. Not just the ranch, but for each other. All I knew was that I'd been drowning, and he'd pulled me out, and I wasn't ready to let go. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. I started spending more time at Willow Creek, drawn to Jesse's quiet strength and the way he made me feel like I belonged. But the shadow of Victor Klein loomed larger, his presence like a storm cloud over the ranch. One afternoon, while Jesse and I were mending a fence under a blistering sun, Rosa came storming out, her face tight with worry. "Klein's men were here again," she said, tossing a crumpled letter onto the ground. "They're offering double what they did last month." Jesse's hands stilled on the wire, his knuckles white. "They can offer the moon," he said. "This land's not for sale." I learned more about Klein over dinner that night. The three of us crowded around a wooden table in the ranch house. He was a slick developer, the kind who wore tailored suits and talked about progress while tearing down everything that mattered. He'd already bought out half the valley, turning family farms into gated communities. Willow Creek was one of the last holdouts, and Klein wasn't used to hearing no. Jesse's determination was fierce, but I saw the strain in his eyes, the weight of carrying his family's legacy alone. Rosa was tough, but she was young, and the ranch's finances were a mess. I wanted to help, but I was just an artist with no money and no roots. Still, when Jesse looked at me across the table, his gaze soft but steady, I felt like I could be more than that. The next day, we rode out to check the herd, the horses' hooves kicking up dust as we crossed the open fields. Jesse was different out here, freer, like the land was part of him. "You ever think about leaving?" I asked, curious. He shook his head. "This is home. Always will be." Then he looked at me, his voice quieter. "But I get why you left yours." I told him more about New York, about the gallery rejections that felt like personal failures, about my parents' silence after I told them I was gay. "They didn't kick me out," I said, staring at the horizon. "They just stopped seeing me." Jesse didn't say anything, but he rode closer, his knee brushing mine, and it was enough. That evening, we ended up at the river again, the same spot where he'd pulled me out. The water was calm now, reflecting the pinks and purples of the sunset. We sat on the bank, shoulders touching, and I felt a pull I couldn't ignore. "Why'd you stop for me that day?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jesse looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Because you looked like you needed saving. And maybe I did too." He leaned in then, slow, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His lips were warm, tentative at first, then sure, and for a moment the world was just us. Two people finding each other in a place neither of us expected. When we pulled back, his hand lingered on my cheek, and I saw a vulnerability in him that mirrored my own. But the moment didn't last. A truck rumbled in the distance, its headlights cutting through the dusk. Jesse tensed, his hand dropping. "That's one of Klein's guys," he said, standing. The driver, a burly man named Carl, got out and handed Jesse a new offer letter, his smirk sharp enough to cut. "Think it over, Navarro," he said. "You can't fight progress." Jesse tore the letter in half without reading it, his face hard. "Tell Klein to stay off my land." Carl laughed, cold and mocking, and drove off. I saw the fire in Jesse's eyes, but also the fear of losing everything. I grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. "You're not alone in this," I said. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw hope flicker in his expression. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of Jesse, the ranch, and the fight ahead. I didn't know how to help, but I knew I wasn't leaving. Not now, not when I'd finally found something worth staying for. The fight for Willow Creek took on a new urgency. Klein's men started showing up more often, leaving letters, making calls, even driving by at night to unsettle us. Jesse was a rock, but I could see the cracks forming. Late nights poring over bills with Rosa, arguments about what to do next. I wanted to be more than a bystander, so I started helping where I could, painting signs for the ranch, sketching ideas to draw tourists. It wasn't much, but it was something. One morning, Rosa pulled me aside, her eyes sharp but kind. "You're good for him, you know," she said. "Jesse doesn't let people in easy, but you're different." I didn't know how to respond, but her words settled in my chest, warm and heavy. I was falling for Jesse hard, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. That afternoon, we got word that Klein was hosting a town hall to pitch his development plans. Jesse decided we should go, to show the town that Willow Creek wasn't giving up. The meeting was in a cramped community center, packed with locals, some curious, some angry. Klein stood at the front, all charm and promises, talking about jobs and modernity. But when Jesse stood to speak, the room went quiet. "This land isn't just dirt," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "It's my family's history, our home. You let Klein take that, you're letting him take a piece of this town." I watched him, proud and terrified, knowing how much this moment cost him. A few people clapped, but others whispered, swayed by Klein's talk of money. After the meeting, a woman named Marla, 50, a local diner owner with kind eyes, pulled us aside. "You've got support, Jesse," she said, "but Klein's got deep pockets. Be careful." Her warning stuck with me, and I saw the same unease in Jesse's face as we drove back to the ranch. That night, we sat on the porch, the stars bright above us. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him, and I hated it. "What if you lose this place?" I asked, my voice soft. He didn't answer right away, just stared out at the dark fields. "Then I lose who I am," he said finally. I reached for his hand, and he let me, his fingers tightening around mine. "You won't lose me," I said, and I meant it. The next day, things took a darker turn. Rosa found tire tracks near the barn, deep and deliberate, like someone had been scoping the place. Then the water pump broke, flooding part of the pasture. Jesse didn't say it, but we all knew it wasn't an accident. Klein was playing dirty, and we had no proof. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done since New York. It was a portrait of Jesse, his face lit by firelight, strong but vulnerable. When I showed it to him, he stared at it for a long time, then pulled me into a kiss that felt like a lifeline. "You see me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not many people do." But the pressure was building, and I knew we couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Klein wasn't just a businessman. He was a predator, and Willow Creek was his prey. I didn't know how we'd fight him, but I knew I'd stand by Jesse, no matter what came next. The sabotage escalated. One morning, we woke to find the main gate torn down. The hinges snapped like they'd been hit with a sledgehammer. Jesse's face was a storm as he surveyed the damage, his hands clenched into fists. "This is Klein," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "He's trying to break us." Rosa called the sheriff, but he was no help. Klein had too many friends in high places. The town was splitting, some rallying behind Jesse, others tempted by Klein's promises. Marla organized a meeting at her diner, where a dozen locals pledged to support Willow Creek. But it wasn't enough. We needed a plan, something to hit Klein where it hurt. I had an idea, born from my days in New York's cutthroat art world. What if we go public? I said one night, sitting with Jesse and Rosa. Get the story out, Klein's tactics, the ranch's history. People love an underdog. Rosa's eyes lit up, but Jesse was skeptical. You think anyone outside Darby cares? He asked. I touched his arm. They will if we make them. We spent days putting it together. I used my old contacts to pitch the story to a regional paper, while Rosa rallied support online, sharing photos of the ranch and its history. I painted a mural on the barn, a vibrant scene of the valley, with the words, "Save Willow Creek," in bold letters. It wasn't just art. It was a battle cry. The response was bigger than we expected. The article went viral, shared across social media with hashtags like Save Willow Creek. People started showing up, locals, tourists, even a reporter from Missoula. Jesse was overwhelmed but grateful, his hand finding mine in the chaos. You did this, he said, his voice thick. I shook my head. We did. But Klein didn't back down. One night, we caught one of his men trying to cut the water line. Jesse chased him off, but not before the man shouted a warning. Klein gets what he wants. The next day, a lawyer showed up with a new offer, this one laced with a threat. If Jesse didn't sell, Klein would tie the ranch up in legal battles until they went bankrupt. That night, Jesse broke. We were alone in the barn, the air heavy with the smell of hay. I can't keep doing this, he said, his voice cracking. I'm failing them. My parents, Rosa, everyone. I pulled him close, my arms around him as he shook. You're not failing, I whispered. You're fighting, and I'm right here. He kissed me then, desperate and raw, like he was holding on for dear life. I kissed him back, pouring everything I had into it. My fear, my hope, my love. We stayed there, wrapped in each other until the world felt a little less heavy. The next morning, we got a break. Marla's nephew, a hacker named Theo, 22, dug up dirt on Klein, shady deals, tax evasion, enough to make a case. It wasn't a silver bullet, but it was leverage. We had a chance, but it would come at a cost. The final showdown came faster than we expected. Theo's evidence gave us enough to take Klein to court, but it also made him desperate. One night, we saw flames in the distance. The old shed, filled with equipment, was burning. Jesse ran toward it, reckless, and I followed, my heart pounding. We put out the fire with help from neighbors, but the damage was done. Klein's men had vanished, leaving no proof, but we knew. Jesse was ready to give up, his face hollow as he stared at the charred remains. Maybe it's time, he said, his voice barely audible. Maybe I let it go. I grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. This is your home, I said, and it's mine now too. We're not done. Something shifted in him then, a spark reigniting. We rallied the town, organizing a protest at Klein's next town hall. Dozens showed up, holding signs, chanting for Willow Creek. I painted a new banner, a portrait of Jesse and Rosa standing strong, with the river behind them. The image spread online, a symbol of resistance. Klein faltered under the pressure. The evidence Theo found made its way to the right people, and soon investigators were circling. Klein's empire started to crumble, his deals falling apart as the truth came out. Willow Creek was safe for now. The night we got the news, Jesse and I went back to the river. The water was calm, the stars bright above us. He took my hand, his voice soft. I thought I was saving you that day, he said. But you saved me. I smiled, my chest tight with emotion. We saved each other. We kissed under the Montana sky, the river whispering beside us. I'd come to Darby to disappear, but I'd found a home, a purpose, a love I never thought possible. Willow Creek wasn't just a place. It was us. Messy, stubborn, unbreakable. Years later, we'd still be there, running the ranch together, Rosa managing the books, tourists coming to see the mural that started it all. The river still flowed, steady and sure, a reminder that sometimes, when you're drowning, all it takes is one hand to pull you out and hold on forever.